What a shock. A female in Hollywood is claiming that the patriarchy is holding her back because she's a woman. But how does she know that she's a woman? Doctors don't even know what a woman is these days. So how is some brainlet actress supposed to discern the intricacies of the modern day dichotomy of gender identity whilst simultaneously lamenting the discriminatory practice of female directors not being allowed to be in charge of $200 million Hollywood productions? It must be exhausting to have an $80 million net worth, Eva.
Aw, shit. Here we go again.
We're over on Variety.com. Welcome back to the place to be reviews. Eva Longoria calls out Hollywood. A white male can direct a $200 million flop and get another one. I can't. Eva Longoria put Hollywood on notice during her Caring Women in Motion talk at the 2023 Cannes Film Festival. Cannes, however you say it. Don't care. Don't pay attention to it, really, outside of nonsense like this. The Desperate Housewives alum, also General Hospital, which she was on 303 episodes of, who was joined by University of Southern California Annenberg professor and researcher Dr. Stacy L. Smith, is making her feature directorial debut with Flamin' Hot, an inspirational story about a Frito-Lay janitor who invented Flamin' Hot Cheetos. The film won an audience award at the South by Southwest Film Festival. As a female director, the first-time director and Latina director, they can't just be a female director, we have to know exactly what her ethnicity is as well. Longoria said she felt the weight of my community and the weight of every female director when a production started on Flamin' Hot. Speaking with Variety chief correspondent Elizabeth Wagemeister, Longoria noted that Hollywood does not play fair when it comes to films directed by women flopping versus male directors. There can be no margin of error for a director like Longoria, as one flop could cost her another directorial gig, she says. Well, when you don't have a body of work to fall back on, and we'll talk about her body of work behind the camera a little later on in the video. I will go back to that, and I do have some numbers for you on that as well. We don't get a lot of bites at the apple, Longoria said about Latina directors. And here we go again. More nonsense, more identity politics, more gender politics brought into it. Intersectionality at its finest. My movie wasn't low budget by any means. It wasn't $100 million, but it wasn't $2 million. When was the last Latina-directed studio film? It was like 20 years ago. We can't get a movie every 20 years. Longoria continued, the problem is if this movie fails, people go, oh, Latino stories don't work. Female directors really don't cut it. We don't get a lot of at-bats. A white male, here it is, a white male can direct a $200 million film, fail, and get another one. That's the problem. I get one at-bat, one chance, work twice as hard, twice as fast, twice as cheap. You really carry the generational traumas with you into the making of a film, Longoria said. For me, it fueled me. I was determined. Okay, so right here, she's, again, denigrating white male directors and trying to use her gender and her ethnic background as leverage to basically extort, which I touch on later on again, a production company, a Hollywood company, investors into giving her a big budget production simply because she's Latina. Now, are there Latina filmmakers? Aren't there? Yes, there are plenty. Now, do we know a lot of their names? No, because we just don't in this country. We haven't seen. And that's the thing is, I mean, around the world, are there films directed by Latina directors? I'm sure there are. Just because they're not happening in America, it's the problem. It's like saying the argument by people like her that, well, this white majority company is racist, systemically, blah, 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 blah. Well, yeah, but this is one of the only countries in the world that's an actual white majority. If you look around the world, white people are a minority. So this whole straw man argument it's absolutely hilarious and just misinformed on all fronts.
Shite. Oh, yes. That's shite.
Dr. Smith, founder of the USC Annenberg Inclusion Initiative, that's a waste of donor money, I should say, which this past week unveiled the inclusion list with the Adobe Foundation. Praise Longoria for walking the walk, having worked closely with the actor, producer, director on the Inclusion Initiative, which provides research on diversity and inclusion in entertainment.
That is one big pile of shit.
This was a collaborative effort to reward folks that are doing well on screen when it comes to representation across multiple categories: gender, race, ethnicity, alphabet, as well as people with disabilities over the age of 65, Smith said. Explaining the inclusion list, are we showing the stories that aren't told? And then who is working behind the camera? See, that doesn't matter. It's absolutely ridiculous. You know, if a story calls for a person of a certain look, disability, gender, ethnicity, okay. But if it doesn't, then what sense does it make to shoehorn that in? That's like all these things saying, well, every movie has to have a certain percentage of representation of all these categories. It's like... that ruins movies. Like, what if if it's going to be considered for an Oscar, it'd have to have these things. Well, you know, the Oscars are garbage and overrated, and nobody pays attention to them anymore. The ratings say that. The numbers at the box office for movies that are made strictly for Oscar contention also speak that. I mean, the majority of the time, Oscar movies are made for Hollywood people. They're made for insiders. They're not made for the average film goer. The metric in which you measure success is important, Longoria added. She said that studios or networks will pat themselves on the back saying, we've doubled the amount of women behind the camera. But Longoria says they've gone from 1 to 2. And you're like, okay, technically you did, but you still only hired 2 women. So how you measure success is really important. And inclusion being that metric is so awesome because you can applaud the people who are doing it right. Well, what if they're hiring these people and they're not qualified for the jobs? That goes in any profession, any industry. Yeah, hiring people for inclusion is great if you're into that sort of shallow hiring metric, but what about people who are actually qualified for the job? With Flamin' Hot, Longoria was adamant on making an inspirational story about Latinos with characters who resembled her own family, from her father to her uncles. The motivational and hopeful story looks at how corporate America underestimates the Hispanic community. The same can be said for Hollywood studios, Longoria observed.
Bullshit.
28% of ticket buyers at the box office are Latino, she said. Your film will not succeed if you don't have the Latino audience. Do you know how many Latinos showed up for Crazy Rich Asians? Do you know how many Latinos bought a ticket for Fast and the Furious? We over-index at movie-going. So why shouldn't there be content for us if we are the ticket buyers? If we are the viewers? For me, I take great pride in throwing around that and buying power weight. If you don't speak to us, we may not buy that movie ticket. There's nothing wrong with making movies for Latinos. The problem is you're doing it you're trying to do it the wrong way. I'm not saying that Flaming Hot is anything wrong with that. No, because it is an inspirational story. It's just the grandstanding and virtue signaling and complaining based on saying your gender and your race are the reason you're not getting roles. You have no directorial debut on the big screen, no big budget experience. Why should somebody give you that? You know, maybe if you start out at the lower stuff, like she said, and then she moves up, okay. But please spare me it's because I'm a woman. Even with the strides that have been made with Latino inclusion in Hollywood, Longoria says, not only is there a long way to go, but statistically, the industry is moving backward. We're still underrepresented in front of the camera. We're still underrepresented behind the camera. We're still not tapping into the females of the Latino community, Longoria said. We are at 7% in TV and film, and now we're at 5%. So the myth that Hollywood is so progressive is a myth when you look at the data. The illusion is that Hollywood is progressive, she added. The reality is that we're still far behind in equal representation. That is an absolutely horrible take by Longoria. But let's look at some other things here.
You've got to do better.
All jokes aside, we're going to look at some female directors who have had some big-time financial success at the box office. And some of these movies date back quite a long time, like Sofia Coppola, Lost in Translation from 2003. $4 million budget made $118,868,937 worldwide. Frozen 2, co-directed by Jennifer Lee. Now, all these totals are domestic. mind you. Now, and I've excluded the Matrix franchise because the Wachowskis aren't female. So, Frozen 2, co-directed by Jennifer Lee, $477.4 million. Twilight, directed by Catherine Hardwicke, $194 million. Look, I know, I hate the movie, it's shit, but it made money. Wonder Woman, directed by Patty Jenkins, $412.6 million. Wayne's World, directed by Penelope Spheris, $121.7 million. Sleepless in Seattle, by Nora Ephron, $126.8 million. You've Got Mail, also by Nora Ephron, $115.8 million. A League of Their Own, directed by Penny Marshall, $107.5 million. Big, also directed by Penny Marshall, $115.2 million. And Pitch Perfect 2, directed by Elizabeth Banks, with $184.3 million. And speaking of Elizabeth Banks, she had a flop under her belt as well in the form of 2019's Charlie's Angels reboot. With a pathetic $8 million opening weekend, it only managed $73,279,888 worldwide total against a $50 million budget that doesn't report or account for the massive amount of marketing or advertising surrounding the movie. Overall, this movie lost in the area of $70 million when marketing and advertising are taken into consideration. So take that, Miss Longoria.
But wait! There's more!
Remember Ava DuVernay in A Wrinkle in Time?
Pepperidge Farm remembers.
Because it was a flop that lost a whopping $130.6 million, and that film had a $100 million production budget, again, not taking marketing and advertising into consideration. Being given a film with a $100 million budget isn't anything to sneeze at, yet Miss Longoria still wants more. What about Black Widow, directed by Kate Shortland, who admitted to not knowing how to read comics?
I'll have to finish it myself.
What are you going to do?
Yet she was given the privilege of directing pay attention, Miss Longoria, an MCU film with a $200 million budget. That again doesn't take into consideration marketing and advertising and reshoots, but Black Widow brought in a mere $379.9 million worldwide gross, meaning if you use a standard 2.5 times multiplier, Black Widow lost some money. Some more female leads in MCU chicanery was the Eternals from indie darling Chloe Zhao, who was given an unheard of $272 million budget, and yet only raked in $402 million worldwide. And again, if you employ the 2.5 times multiplier, you guessed it, Eternals lost some money. So Eva Longoria, who I mentioned before, has a net worth of an estimated 80 million United States dollars. Her spouse, Jose Baston, is worth 20 million US dollars. So I can imagine life is very tough for them living in such an impoverished existence. Longoria has an acting career spanning 23 years after a talent contest brought her to LA and she got noticed, as they say. But she has 18 directing credits, resume, and most of those are episodic television, no big budget stuff. A few, like I said, episodes of TV and some shorts, although nothing with a massive budget. Nothing in the $200 million range that she seems to feel entitled to for some odd reason. And I find it personally hilarious that Eva Longoria, who has a relatively short history behind the camera, finds it odd she's not at the top of lists to lead $200 million Hollywood productions, just because there's been male directors who have directed financial flops and still gotten work on big budget productions afterwards. Imagine being so full of yourself that you can't believe that someone who has 1 or 2 failures in an otherwise stellar career is given opportunities out of faith by production companies who believe in their proven abilities. Longoria is set to make her quote-unquote big screen directorial debut with Flamin' Hot, although that movie's only going to Hulu. So there you have it, folks. Eva Longoria has a 23-year acting career. She's 48 years old, probably aware she's not going to be able to play on her looks forever. And that's not to say that she's not beautiful now, but we all know that the wall is undefeated against aesthetics. And Eva is trying to position herself for that inevitability and using intersectionality in an attempt to leverage a company into giving her a massive budget project. Do you find any validity to the claims that Miss Longoria is making of this aforementioned gatekeeping from keeping females and especially Latinas away from big budget productions, or is this just more virtue signaling and intersectionalism boiling over onto the surface of somebody who knows, as I stated, that the wall is coming for her? Let me know in the comments below, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for watching. I'm Etep from The Place to Be Reviews. I've been here with all of you. If I don't see you, have a great day, a pleasant tomorrow, and I will catch you on the next one.
It's better to burn out than to fade away.
I could do this all.
This doesn't bode well.
You're lying. I never hit you. You are tearing me apart, Lisa.
No tears, please. It's a waste of good suffering.